Hey dancers, welcome back to Broche Banter. I am your host, Julie. Today we're talking all about pointe shoes. I put out a request for questions for this pointe episode, and I was actually extremely surprised to hear that most of the questions were about my own personal journey with pointe. I was totally expecting for you to want to ask about how you could get on pointe, how pointe works for adults, if pointe is possible. I was totally expecting that range of questions, and that's not what I got. So that's not what I'm going to talk about. If you have questions about how to go on pointe as an adult, if it's possible for you, I will have links to the episodes that I've done about pointe specifically and how to go on pointe as an adult in the description. Please give those a listen. But I asked for your questions and I got them, and I'm going to answer them here today. So let's talk about my journey with pointe. Okay, so I started ballet at 17. If you haven't already listened to my story, I have the link for that in the show notes too. So I started ballet at 17, and I assumed pointe wasn't possible for me. I assumed I had started too late and that I didn't have good feet for it, which if you are watching this on video or you've seen my feet, I have like banana feet. So for me to have assumed that I didn't have good feet just shows how little I knew about ballet and about how little education there is and was about pointe shoes at that time, or that I knew how to find or whatever. But the thing is, I was 17 and all the other girls who were 17 were already amazing on pointe. And so I assumed you had to have gone on pointe since you were younger. I assumed it was something you had to do when you were a kid, and that if you didn't go on pointe when you were a kid, that you couldn't do it later. I just assumed that, I guess. So I started ballet anyways, but not really thinking pointe was a possibility. And then I went, after I moved to New York City, I would go to the New York City Ballet because they would offer these great student tickets you could get for like $10 or $15 to sit in the back on nights when they had extra seats available, and I would take full advantage of those. And one time I went to a New York City Ballet show and loved it. It was amazing. I mean, it was so good, right? And afterwards in the lobby, they were selling signed pointe shoes from the dancers. And this wonderful woman named Stacy who had come with me, she was one of my early mentors of just moving to New York City. Like, she took me to get my first winter coat because I had no idea what I was doing having moved from San Diego. She basically kind of took me under her wing just for life, just about how to live life and not get lost in the city. But she had gone with me to the ballet, and she noticed these signed pointe shoes, and she's like, look, they're only like $10 or $15. You should totally get a pair. And so I have them here. I actually kept them. I have them right here. And I bought them, and they were my first pair of pointe shoes, and I took them back to my dorm room, and of course I put them on my feet. They happened to be about my size, and I put them on my feet. No padding or anything. I didn't know about padding. I just put them on my feet, and I stood up on them, and I'm pretty sure I have a picture of me in my college dorm room wearing these pointe shoes. And I was delighted that I could stand on my toes, and I was like, oh wow, I guess pointe would be possible for me. And then pointe became one of my goals because I realized, like, wow, I can probably do it. So this was the pair that started it all. If you're listening to this on audio, I highly recommend watching the video at some point to get to see it. They're very old, they're very beat up, and they're signed by an Ellen. Yes. So that was my first experience getting on pointe, quote unquote, a little bit illegal, let's say. So after that, I was still training, and I had met my private teacher, Beth, when I was 19. And at some point training with Beth, she said to me, you know, I bet you're probably ready for pointe shoes. So do you want to go get fitted for pointe shoes? And I was like, oh my God, yes, of course, absolutely, let's go. And so we got on the subway together, and she took me down to the Sancha store and got me fitted for pointe shoes. And it was the most exciting day. Like, I think I spent the entire rest of the day taking pictures of these pointe shoes from all different angles. Just was in love with the pointe shoes. That was when I had like one of those, it wasn't film, it was a digital camera. So I have like very few pictures of it now, but I think I have a couple of the original files. So these were my first pair. These 3/4 shank Sancha shoes. These were my very first pair of pointe shoes that I went to go get fitted. They were the most exciting thing I had ever owned. And yeah, it was just like magical. I couldn't believe that I was getting pointe shoes. I couldn't believe I'd be one of those girls who would get to walk into class and put her pointe shoes on with all the other girls. I wouldn't have to leave early. You know, I would be able to like wear my pointe shoes and stay for the pointe classes and be able to do it. So that was when we got started. My private teacher would teach me for about 15 minutes at the end of each class to put the pointe shoes on at the end of class. But honestly, the beginning of pointe was actually extremely hard. I'm going to read you an excerpt from the Vaganova instruction book. Looking at my feet, you would think pointe would be very easy for me. And I know that this is kind of like when someone is born with a silver spoon and then complains about problems. People don't like to hear it. But anyone who has a banana foot out there, I'm going to read this to you and you might commiserate with my story. So Vaganova, the Vaganova handbook says this: strictly speaking, point work is dancing on the extreme tips of all toes, the arch of which is extended. There are various forms of points, and she goes on to describe the point shoes. Then she says, the foot, which we consider beautiful in everyday life, i.e. one with a high arch, well-turned, slim ankle, correctly grouped toes, makes it difficult to execute movement on points, especially those movements which require jumps on points. However, even though such a foot cannot be placed on all toes as required by the rules of ballet, it can be helped by diligent work to a greater turnout so that the foot will be supported on as many toes as possible and does not rest with its weight fully only on the big toe. So she says, the foot which we consider beautiful makes it difficult to execute movements on point. Even she herself says this foot is not ideal for point work. I know it looks beautiful, but I always have joked through my whole career that my feet are like catalog model shoes, model feet. They're not functional. So it's been a very long road for me with point shoes, and many, many times I've decided that I was done with it and I wasn't going to pursue it anymore. Obviously, I always came back to it, but it was a difficult first journey. And honestly, my teacher didn't know how to help me. So together we studied all of Lisa Howell's courses. We bought all of her books and all of her DVDs, and we would study them together to try to learn and understand how to work on my feet and ankles. Because as far as she was concerned, I should have been perfectly ready for point. My feet were the right shape and they looked beautiful. And this is unfortunately a very common thing that people put adults into point shoes when they have beautifully arched feet, but they're not ready. They're not ready strength-wise. And so personally, when I assess people, I am obsessed with, especially people with a banana foot, making sure they're strong and not wobbly and really have the intrinsic muscles in their feet and in their arches, because we know so much more about this now than we did back then. So anyways, it was really, really tough for me and Beth to figure out what to do with my feet. I mean, it was really, really tough. And I just remember like thinking it wasn't going to be possible for me. I wasn't going to be able to do it. Like the issue that I faced was that my feet are so arched that I would just feel like I was falling over a cliff in my shoes, and I would just feel like I was going to like spill out the front of the shoes and that I couldn't stay up. So then I would end up pushing my hips back and my posture would get all messed up because I was just trying to not fall over. And, you know, every dancer, I mean, a lot of dancers especially do struggle with point in the beginning. It's not unusual, but it was surprising to everybody that I struggled with point because my feet looked like they wouldn't struggle with point. I think it took me a couple of like years to be comfortable getting off the bar and to be okay with my point shoes in the center. It was very, very scary. So I started with these Sancha shoes, these little 3/4 shank nuggets. And then I did some forensics back in my box. I've got this whole bag here, and I've got another entire box off screen here of point shoes. I think I've kept all the shoes that I've ever worn. Obviously I have the whole rainbow collection on my wall here too. So I have a lot of point shoes around. So let's go through some of the forensics. So after I did the Sancha shoes, I had tried also like Capezio and Block, but what I found is that it was just so painful. Like my feet would just kill the shoes and I would just be sinking to the bottom with pain on my big toes, and just really, really struggled with a lot of point shoes. They would die so fast. Then I was in a Grishko for a while. This is extra hard. You can see on the bottom, it's a very hard flex. I was in the Grishko for a little while. And then I went to go meet a really amazing point shoe fitter in Castle Rock in Colorado that my grandparents who live in Colorado had found an article from him. And when I went to visit them, they took me down to Castle Rock to get fitted by him. And I learned a ton about point shoes at that time and about cutting your toenails and about why I couldn't do certain things on point. This guy was so incredibly knowledgeable. I think his name was Noel. At Awesome Ballet Dancewear, I think that sounds right. He was so incredibly knowledgeable and taught me so much about my feet. Like I was sore after that fitting. He spent like 2 hours with me and basically taught me why I was struggling. He showed me how to use my glutes and how to work on my pelvis and how to actually get it to work. And that was like a really big turning point for me. I got these Russian points. That he fitted me in with a really thick crisscross elastic and a different ribbon placement that I had been used to. And really, this set me up for the next stage of my journey, was getting these Russian points. This was probably like 5+ years into my point journey, maybe 6 years into my point journey that I got these shoes. The first shoes that I actually felt like were workable, that I could like actually enjoy a point class in without being in pain or needing to take my point shoes off halfway through the class or really feeling like I was struggling. These were one of the first pairs. I was in those for a couple of years, and then also in Colorado. At that point, I had moved to Colorado. I went to a really great another really great pointe shoe fitter at Dance Extreme. Her name is Vicky, and she was extremely knowledgeable. Again, spent a couple of hours with me, and she fit me in the shoes that I wear now, which are the Suffolk Solo, also very, very hard. I love these shoes. They've got such a high wing up the side, so they don't have a high vamp, but they have a high wing, which really keeps my foot upright and stops that sensation of falling over the front of the shoe. So these were another big step up, another piece in the journey and in the puzzle was these Suffolks that I got from her. I have a couple more notable shoes here that I'll tell you about, but I tried a couple of other things throughout. Like I was really struggling with, like I said, falling over the tip of the shoe. So I had tried Vamp Elastic, which is a piece of elastic that you stick over the top of your foot and the top of your arch to kind of add extra support so you don't fall past the shoe. That was a really helpful thing to try. I also would try stitching threads across the top opening of the shoe that would kind of help hold my foot back in the shoe so I wasn't feeling like I was falling off the shoe. Those were all really helpful things to try for me as I've looked in my pointe shoe journey. And really one of the biggest changes in my pointe shoe journey, there's two big recent changes in my pointe journey. Number one was really training with the teacher who I train with now, Katya. She's an incredible teacher. She teaches Vaganova style. And all of the work we've done together on hip stability and kind of changing the placement of the body from how I used to stand and how I used to dance. We've changed the placement of the body with much more weight into the heels versus into the ball of the foot, and really, really updated my technique and the way I hold my hips. That's made a huge difference in the stability on pointe. As Vaganova says, you need a much more strength in your turnout in order to control such an archy foot, to be able to feel safe and secure up there. And so that made a really, really big difference. And then the next thing that made a really big difference was I gave the new 3D printed pointe shoes a try, the Actable 3D printed points. Now the Actable 3D printed points were a whole different feeling of shoe. And they were actually one of the first shoes where I felt like they had so much support that I could actually point my feet in the pointe shoes, and I could actually point them fully without feeling like I was gonna fall. Whereas all other pointe shoes, the technique that I learned to cope with, to be able to cope with this challenge, was to always ride the back of the box a little bit and to actively pull my foot back, but that's caused a lot of Achilles pain and issues over the years. So I had kind of learned that technique to cope and just to not fall off the top of the box. I had kind of learned, self-taught, and learned, other teachers have maybe advised me here and there, this technique to pull back off the box a little bit. And that the Actable 3D printed points were the first shoe that I could actually point fully, extend my arch fully. They have these straps inside of them, a 3D printed shank, and this like elastic sock. So you feel very, very supported on the front of the shoe. And I could actually push onto the shoe. There was actually so much support that I could actually point my feet and not fall. And once I spent about maybe it's been about 4 months that I've been trying the Actable points, then I went back to my regular Suffolk Solo pointe shoes, and my technique had changed. My technique had changed immensely. My feet understood how to point in the pointe shoes and understood how to control the pointe shoes in a way that I've never been able to do before. I mean, I was able to do a lot in my pointe shoes before, but with this really difficult technique of trying to control the shoes from my ankles and not from my toes. So this shoe this Actable with 3D printed point allowed me to actually use my toes, which is what I teach to everybody who has trouble getting on the box, is how to use your toes to point in the shoes. But for me, it's always been the opposite, that I've had to pull back with my toes and not push with my toes. I'll talk a bit more about the toe situation in just a sec. But after having this time in the Actable 3D printed shoes, yeah, it's been really actually incredible and surprising to watch my technique change a little bit when I get back into my regular pointe shoes. Like it's almost like night and day comparing my pointe technique from 5 months ago to now that you can actually touch the tip of the shoe. Getting the correct shoe makes all the difference in your pointe technique. I mean, whenever we're looking for a shoe, it's always a game of like, is it me or is it the shoe? Do I need to be stronger or do I need a different shoe? Sometimes the answer is some of each. Sometimes the answer is yes, you need to be a little bit stronger and you need a slightly different shoe, right? It's always kind of a guessing game of, is it me or is it the shoe? And sometimes when you do get that correct shoe, your feet can change immensely. Your understanding of how to stand on pointe can change immensely because you're taking the fear out of it and you're taking the pain out of it, which means that you can actually focus on correct technique. With adults, we struggle a lot with fear and a lot with pain when it comes to getting up on pointe, and finding the right shoe can really, really help alleviate some of those issues and some of those things. So a couple more notable pointe shoes here. I did wear Gainer Mindens for a little while. This is actually a really fun shoe that I'm holding if you're watching this on video. I was a Gainer Minden Pointe shoe tester for a little while, and this one inside says made expressly for Jay Gill. I love this Pointe shoe. It's printed inside the shoe, and I love that shoe. Gainer Mindens were not the shoe for me. They really did not turn out to be the shoe for me. They were just too flexible and did not give me enough support. In fact, I was wearing a Gainer Minden for a little while and ended up with a pretty bad FHL tendon injury, my big toe tendon. I ended up with that, and I actually couldn't do a releve for about 6 months. It was a very long rehab process from that. Just the shoes were too soft and too malleable. The thing is with beautiful feet, you walk into a Pointe shoe fitting and the fitters, they will just often put you in the most beautiful shoe, which makes sense. Your feet are beautiful and they want to see it look so beautiful, and they love seeing how it looks in the shoes. And sometimes the less supportive shoes will make your feet look so pretty. And so if you get the wrong fitter and you get someone who doesn't understand banana feet, you could end up in a shoe that just doesn't give you enough support, and then you end up getting hurt. You end up getting injured. So that was that. I did wear gainers for like maybe a year before that happened. So I was in some good ones, but then I think I was trying a different box combination, shank combination, and it just really wasn't enough support for what I was trying to do, and ended up with that injury. But anyways, I still love this shoe. It's so cute, and so I love that my name is in it. It feels so like, yeah, you get to be like a Gainer girl. And then a couple other notable Pointe shoes. I will keep this pair of Pointe shoes. I have a little swan feather in it. I will talk about this very soon on the podcast, but I actually got to dance in the Corps de Ballet of Swan Lake in Germany in January. I haven't talked about it too much yet. If you're not a member in my classes, you maybe don't know about it yet, but I got to dance there, and I will forever keep these Pointe shoes and the swan feather that fell off my little headpiece while I was there. A very special pair of shoes with the dirt from the stage on it that I get to take back and keep with me. Then, of course, my Bedazzled Pointe shoes. These are what I wore for my wedding. The reason I did this was actually all the way back to college. And if you listen to my story, you already know this story, but I'll tell you now how it gave me these Bedazzled Pointe shoes. So I was in college and I graduated at the top of my class, which meant I got to sit. We graduated in Radio City Music Hall. So I graduated and I got to sit on the stage at the music hall. And I had the idea that I wanted to wear my Pointe shoes to the graduation because it would be really special and meaningful to me, and I would love to wear them there. But I was afraid. I was so afraid that I was going to trip and fall, and so I chickened out. I had brought my Pointe shoes with me, and I was going to put them on backstage, but I chickened out and I wore my regular shoes. So that, what a missed opportunity, right? What a missed opportunity. I could have said in my life that I've worn Pointe shoes on Radio City Music Hall stage, like where the Rockettes dance. I could have said that, but I chickened out. So then I kind of had this idea that wearing Pointe shoes for a special occasion was something I wanted to do. And so when it came to my wedding, one of the beautiful people in my community ended up offering to bedazzle a pair of Pointe shoes for me. I was planning on just wearing a painted white pair, but then she offered to bedazzle them, and she glued all these incredible gems and crystals onto the shoes for me. And I borrowed down the aisle on a moving boat, holding on to my dad for my wedding. So that was it was a great redemption story for the Radio City Music Hall. I didn't get to wear them for that, but these are way better pair of Pointe shoes than I was going to ever wear for that. And I got to bore down the aisle with my dad. So really special memory that I get to have. And I love these Pointe shoes. They're so dead from wearing them for that whole thing, but they're a very special pair that I'll always keep, and I keep on display in my room. So I've got a couple questions that you guys have sent over to me. So what are my most recommended stretches and exercises for getting over your box? Okay, this is where I talk a lot about the feet controlling your shoes. So when I talk about Pointe, when I teach Pointe, especially for adults, you know, when you teach Pointe to kids, it's a whole different thing. And many of you take classes with teenagers, and you know that the teacher just says, do a pirouette, and they just do a pirouette for the most part because kids are a bit more fearless than we are. They just kind of go for it and do it. But adults really need the step-by-step instruction of what exactly is happening, what's going on in your Pointe shoes, how do you make them look good, how do you make them feel safe, how do you not get hurt doing this? And so I always say in my Pointe classes that your toes need to control your shoes and not vice versa. You need to learn how to use your toes to point your pointe shoe and use your toes to create demi-pointe in your pointe shoe. The pads of your toes curve the shoe, the toenails flex the shoe. And you need to learn how to use your toes to go up on pointe. A big part of my pointe readiness test is toe dexterity. But can you use your toes? Because you need your toes to be the puppet master of your pointe shoes. You control your shoes from the inside out. So if we're not over the box yet, it could be a couple of things. Knowing what the problem is key to the solution. Imagine you're trying to fix something that you can't even see. How are you supposed to fix it? You have to look at it first. So what's the problem why you're not over the box? Is it because you're having a flexibility issue? And now within flexibility, is it the toes? Is it the midfoot? Is it the ankle? Is it an Achilles blockage? Is it the shin? Is it something with the knees? Is it the placement of your hips? Is it because your core, you're leaning back and you're not over the box? Like, where is it up the chain? There are so many places that it could be that it's not as simple as just like stretch your feet and you'll get over the box. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has to do with a lot of different factors in your body causing you to be behind your box. The other thing is it could be strength. So let's say you have the flexibility, you have enough range of motion, but once you are weight bearing, your feet don't understand how to point in the shoes, your feet don't understand how to control the tip of the box. Your toes can't reach the tip of the box and they don't know how to point far enough down to actually get yourself onto the box and shape your shank from the inside out. Your shoes and your toes and your feet need to shape your shoe from the inside out, not just letting the shoe shape itself. It's not going to shape itself. Okay, even a pre-art shoe is not going to shape itself. Your toes have to do the work to shape the shoe. So that's the second thing. It could be strength. The third thing, it could be something to do with the shoe is not right. It could be that the shank is not bending in the correct place. It could be that the box, there's something wrong with the vamp. It could be that the wings aren't right. It could be that you don't have the right padding, therefore your feet are sitting sideways in the pointe shoe. It could be that your toes are very short and you need a different pointe shoe to be able to control underneath your foot. So if it's strength, it could even be many, many more factors. It could be something, or if it's the shoe, it could be many, many more factors, not just the shank itself. It could be so many different factors playing into that. If you have a bunion, sometimes that bunion toe can't push hard enough because that bunion toe, since it's kind of off its axis, can't push as hard as it needs to be able to get over the box. So we need to go back and do TheraBand work on that individual toe or strengthening work on that individual toe. Could be many, many different things. And again, it could also be that your glutes aren't strong enough to push your body forward over the shoe. It could be that your core isn't strong enough and you're leaning back and you can't get forward enough to put enough weight on the front of your shoe. Could also be the outside of the ankle. Could be that the winging motion is not strong or developed enough and the outside of the ankle is not strong enough to push you over the box in that direction. Could be any of those aspects. So the question, what are your most recommended stretches and exercises for getting over your box? Number one is try to start experimenting and eliminating variables. Looking at your feet, testing different things with and without the shoes. Okay, I have this much range of motion when I touch my foot and stretch it. And then I have this much range of motion when I point bare feet. And then I have this much range of motion when I point in a tendu. And then I have this much range of motion in fifth and in first. You have to be an expert on your own individual feet. Because the thing is, they don't make clear pointe shoes. So nobody can see what's happening inside of your shoe, except for you can maybe feel it. But there's so much sleuthing you have to do in your pointe shoes to get to know why you're not over your box. If it's flexibility, try to do different stretches to explore where you feel it. Really notice, do you actually feel the stretch in the top of your foot when you stretch your ankle? Do you actually feel the stretch in your shin? Do you feel pinching or blockage in your Achilles? Does your ankle move in full flex and point range? Like, you really want to explore the wide, full range of motion of your feet. It is not as simple as just stretching your feet and being able to get over the box. There's many factors that have to do with this beautiful instrument you have, which is your foot that carries you through life. Do you have any pointe shoe hacks? Well, the pointe shoe hacks, that I have done, as I've showed you, I had tried the vamp elastic and stitching across the front, but I like to think about hacks I use this word also when it comes to development and business. I call it pain-driven development. It doesn't have to be physical pain, but anytime you have a problem, then you find a hack to solve it. So you're not just like randomly sewing your shoes in different ways or like randomly trying to break it. You have specific issues that you're having that you then seek out different things in the shoe to try to solve it. So you're thinking like, well, I can point my foot really far when I'm bare feet, but as soon as I put my pointe shoes on, I feel like I can't get my toes as far down. Okay, that's interesting. Now we start to look for solutions around that. We're like, oh, I have a slipping heel. How do I get that? And then you start looking at people who've sewn down the sides. You start looking at people who put the heel grippers in there. You start looking at the things around that. You've got a vamp that's too tall. You cut a V in it. You've got, you need a higher wing because you've got bunion joints falling over the sides. So you get a higher wing, or you jet glue the sides. Like it all comes down to what problem you're personally having in the shoe, and then taking steps to try to look for a quote unquote hack around that. Every problem is unique, and every hack is to solve a specific problem. So this idea that you can just try random hacks, sometimes it's helpful to experiment, but if you don't even know what you're trying to solve, then you don't know if an experiment worked or not. So we're always searching, and we're thinking about what are the problems that my feet are having in pointe shoes, and how am I going to look for solutions to those particular pointe problems. Question, do you break in your pointe shoes in any way? Okay, I'm like the lamest person on the internet about breaking in your pointe shoes. I do not break in my pointe shoes because my feet kill pointe shoes in like 2 seconds. And anything you do to break in your pointe shoes, it takes life away from your shoes, at least for me. So I do not bend my shank. I do not crush my boxes. I do not do anything crazy. I sew my shoes. And if I really want them to last a long time, I use the Pointe People colored paint, because that Pointe People paint has the effect of like basically jet gluing your entire shoe. And it lasts way, way, way longer when I paint my pointe shoes. Now, painting your pointe shoes is not a good idea if you're taking them to a studio class. It can ruin your studio's Marley. So do not paint your pointe shoes and take them into class. They're fine at home. I don't mind if my own Marley mat has paint colors all over it, but don't take painted pointe shoes into the studio if you haven't asked for permission from the studio owner, because Marley is expensive and they won't appreciate if you bring in shoes that ruin their Marley. But that is all I do to break in my shoes. I just sew them, maybe paint them if I need them to last a long time, and wear them for a handful of classes. When I wear them, I really focus in on the demi-pointe. So grand plie is really helpful to get that demi-pointe to bend. Tendus and prances are really helpful to get the shoes molded to your feet. I do like to step on the boxes on my other foot as I'm wearing it if I need to get it just a little bit more comfortable. But no, I pretty much wear my pointe shoes to pointe and do ballet in them to break them. Again, I'm the lamest person around when it comes to that. My problems with pointe shoes were not solved by breaking them in. My problems with pointe shoes were solved by adding more stuff, adding more support and more items to it. So yeah, I don't soften my shoes in any way. What pointe shoes do I wear? What pointe shoes have I tried? What do I need in a pointe shoe? See, now this is an interesting question. I've taken you through a lot of my shoe journey so far, from the Sanchas to the Block and Capezio, the Grishko, the Russian Pointe, the Suffix, the Gainers, the Actable 3D printed points, and of course my first pair from the New York City Ballet. So now I'm considering, now that I've had this big shift in my pointe technique from the Actable pointe shoes, when I'm really able, as a banana-footed person, when I'm really able to practice what I preach, what I preach about the toes controlling the shoes is really perfect for people who are not on the box, right? When you are too far over the box, it's very hard to use, it's very hard to do, as I've mentioned. So now that I've had this shoe that really allows me to do that myself as a banana-footed person and fully stretch my toes, I am considering going to get refitted for a new pair with maybe a more streamlined box. I feel like I may want a slightly more streamlined shoe. The Suffix are a bit boxy. I like them boxy because I like all the extra support. I don't like the scary feeling of feeling like I'm falling in my pointe shoes. I don't like that feeling at all. And so I really don't want a shoe that makes me feel like I'm going to fall over the box. It has to be like, as Noel in Awesome Blade said, it has to be like a workhorse shoe. That's what he told me, of the type of shoe that I needed. But now I feel like I'm able to wear shoes for a little bit longer when they're a little bit more dead. And I'm curious to go get refitted at some point in the near future and see if anything has changed. When you do get the right shoe and you do start working correctly on pointe, your technique can change a lot and your feet can change a lot. So it is always good to go get refitted and to try some new things. I may do that again. Yeah, I'm in kind of an interesting time in my pointe journey where I've got pretty much my third, I would say this is my third big shift in pointe technique. The Russians was the first, the Suffix was the second, and the Acts was the third. So I'm curious. I'll keep you guys posted if I do end up going to get fitted for another one. Another question: have I ever considered becoming a pointe shoe fitter? Yes, I have. In fact, I have bought the pointe shoe certification course from the Pointe Shop. I actually bought it and didn't take it at the time. It was when she was running it asynchronously course, and I bought it, and it was not the right time for me. I was very busy. I was doing a lot of different things. I was actually, things were a little bit in flux. I was working on a lot of things. It was one too many things to take on at that point, was to do the Pointe shoe certification. But yes, I do think it would be interesting to be a Pointe shoe fitter at some point, especially because it's such a problem-solving based thing where you get to look at the issues and help people solve them and, dive into the Pointe shoes. But I do know that it's a whole other realm of things to learn. And so I want to be in a place where I can not only A, have the time to learn it, but B, actually have the time to offer fitting services. I mean, my calendar is already jammed with the group classes, private lessons, and, festival rehearsals that I teach. So having the certification without the ability to practice the fitting, I kind of want to do this certification at a time when I have the ability to offer Pointe shoe fittings. I mean, I would love one day to carry Pointe shoes as well and to be able to sell it, because we do have a pretty robust Pointe program at Broche, which I'm very, very proud of. We have so many adults who have gone on Pointe safely, successfully, gone to perform on Pointe, assimilated into their local environments after having learned at home. I'm very, very proud of our Pointe program, and it is sometimes difficult to get Pointe shoes to everybody around the globe. And so it would be fun to carry Pointe shoes at some point to be able to do that. But that's kind of like a whole new thing. That's like kind of a whole new thing, a big project. So I have a sense that might happen in the future, but right now I am aware that could be really fun and a good complement to the programs that I offer now, but I'm not ready to sink my teeth into it yet. I think with Pointe, it's such an interesting thing for adults learning Pointe, because I see all kinds of different people learning Pointe. Like, some people just, all they want to do is to experience what it's like to stand up on their toes. Like, they just are really curious about it and want to know what it feels like. So for some people, like my very first experience of buying this signed pair of Pointe shoes and putting them on in my dorm room, like for some people, that's all that they need to know, and then they will feel satisfied with their Pointe journey. There are some people who want to be able to dance and freely express themselves on Pointe and be able to make Pointe shoes look so graceful and beautiful, like what you'll see dancers on stage. And then there's some people who are kind of in between, where they have the dream of Pointe and they get the Pointe shoes and they realize that it's a huge amount of work, and then they end up with smaller micro goals of Pointe. And some people even have Pointe as a goal, and once they experience Pointe shoes, like that's enough for them, and they don't necessarily feel the need to continue pursuing Pointe and continue working on it. Like it is a very hard thing to work on. It is a very challenging project. I mean, as I've mentioned through this, even with the banana feet, it's been how long now? I've been on Pointe. I got on Pointe when I was 19 and I'm 34. So I've been on Pointe for 15 years, and I'm on my third big shift in my Pointe technique, right? And now obviously my Pointe has come a very, very long way since then, but it's a long journey. It's a slow journey. Pointe technique is like a whole other thing. Yes, your ballet technique translates some, but as an adult, you have a huge fear response to it. And a lot of times your body will seize up and sort of panic while you're doing it, especially if you have generally low tolerance for physical, like the feeling of physical danger or physical risk. If you don't like being dizzy, if you don't like weird, sensations in your body, then Pointe can be really jarring to your nervous system. So it's like a whole other project, like a whole other thing. And for some people that is exciting, and for some people they just want to dip their toes in and go on Pointe and get to experience it, and then that's enough for them to enjoy and feel like they reached their goal and they got to live their dream in that moment. And I think there can be some stigma around adults on Pointe, and around pushing adults to do the exact same thing as kids in the exact same timeline. Sometimes adults will put this pressure on themselves too, especially if they're in a studio dancing with kids. But I think that for adults, the goals on Pointe are so varied and such a wide range that when you're thinking about assessing an adult dancer for Pointe, a big part of that is understanding what is your goal with this. Like, some people never even want to leave the bar in their Pointe shoes. That person is a very different Pointe candidate than someone who is trying to join a local class with a bunch of teenagers and it needs to be able to do pirouettes on Pointe. Each journey is going to look so different, and supporting every person in their Pointe journey, a lot has to do with what they're trying to do with it. The adult dancer often comes to Pointe with so much doubt and anxiety that they won't ever be able to do it, that sometimes it can be really difficult for them to even work on it. And sometimes they'll want to rush to get on Pointe and move really faster, and they just want to get there. And I I think there's a lot of stigma around that too. Like a lot of the advice will just be like, slow down, have patience, wait, it'll come, it'll happen, it'll develop. And like, yes, all of that stuff is true. But also when you're telling that to someone who already thinks that their time has passed for this activity or that they won't be able to do it, and then you just tell them, be patient, it'll happen in due time. I don't think that's the right answer to tell someone who thinks that they're not going to be able to do it, or who feels like the ticking clock of how much longer they're going to be able to do and enjoy ballet. Like, this person has a sense of urgency that I think is worth respecting, and helping that person work as hard as they feel like working to get up on point. So I think sometimes people can belittle that adult for wanting to rush. They don't care about the basics. They just want to move on to point work. But it's like, understand where that person is coming from. Understand that person's own fears around why they're rushing to get to point, why it's so urgent for them. Did you ask them why it was so urgent for them, why it matters so much to them, before you told them they should just be patient and wait it out, and it'll come, it'll develop over time? I mean, for that person, that might sound like you're never going to be able to get there, right? So I think that there's not enough conversation with adults about the honest truth about the risks of point, and the way to get ready for point, and in some cases, the lack of risks to go on point. Like, it is every adult's prerogative to work as hard or not as hard as they want. If you're not working hard enough to get on point and your feet aren't strong enough and you're at potential for injury, your teacher should tell you that it could be dangerous. But at the end of the day, that person, if they have only the goal and desire to check the box that they got to experience these point shoes, it's like, that is that person's goal and that person's prerogative. The teacher can do their best to tell the person about the risks of point shoes, about what it takes to be ready for it, and about how long it's going to take to get ready for it. But at the end of the day, you have to respect that individual adult with their own fears and concerns and challenges around life. So point can be really, really hard. And I think sometimes people conflate that with dangerous. And in some cases, point can be dangerous. And in some cases, point is not dangerous. I think it is more important to be clear about what those risks are, what you're going to get hurt if you have the wobbly ankles and you try to get up there and you try to leave your bar too soon, what kind of thing that is. Like for me with the soft shoes, if you've got the banana feet and you put on too soft or unsupportive shoes, these type of things, these type of dangers, we can be more specific about what they are and be more honest and open with our dancers. Again, maybe this doesn't work for kids. Maybe you can't be as open with them about it. Maybe it's more age-based for kids. I don't know. That's a whole other animal. I'm not talking about that. But when it comes to adults, taking their own journey, taking their own risks, and being fully informed about point work and what it takes and what to work on. I err on the side of transparency and trying to explain as much as possible about what it takes to go on point and how to get ready for it. All that being said, there is so much fulfillment to be had in being able to get this pair of point shoes. I think for so many of us, ballet isn't ballet without point shoes. Like, we love the look of point shoes, the square toe, how you're up on your toes, like how it really makes everything have that sort of like ballerina look. And I think that's a really big part of it. I think sometimes people will give a bad rap that you want that look, but like, it's so fun to look down at your feet and see point shoes sitting there. Like, it is so fun. And it is very, very rewarding to work extremely hard on something and be able to actually achieve it, and to be able to see the point shoes and to be able to get it almost like a badge of honor, or like a leveling up or a belt or a rite of passage. It kind of has that feeling in that sense. I'm very happy to see so much more information and inspiration for adults going on point that has been, coming online in the latest year or even 2 years. It's really, really starting to transform and change that adults doing point is becoming a bit more mainstream. And I'm so happy about that, because there's no need for people to sit in the dark and think that it couldn't be for them. Go get educated, learn about what it takes, learn about if it's possible for you, get the education you need to learn if it can be a possibility in your particular personal life. Maybe in your in-person studio, there's not enough interest in going in a point class, but that doesn't mean you can't do the research and figure out, like, join my program or join another program where you working with a private teacher where you can work to get up on point. It is such a cool thing, such a cool part of ballet, and something so unique that ballet has to offer that I think it's worth it for everybody to try to work towards it if it's something that is in your heart and in your mind. We're also launching a really special Pointe edition of Broche magazine, which is on sale right now. The pre-orders are on sale right now. If you order during the pre-order, you can also pick up a limited edition Broche tee, which has a Do What You Love logo. The V is a pair of Pointe shoes, and you can also pick up one that says On Point with a beautiful Pointe shoe ribbon that runs up the shoulder of the shirt. They're in a gorgeous pink and mauve color to go with the color themes of the magazine. We also have our Pointe shoe keychains on sale that say brooch on the sole so that you can carry your Pointe dreams in your bag wherever you go. This is such a big part of the ballet journey for so much of us, and I want to do as much as I can to make it as safe, enjoyable, and accessible as possible for any adult who has this dream in their heart and who's ready to work towards it. So everything here with this whole conversation, I hope, adds to that for you if you want to enjoy some beautiful images in the magazine of women of all ages going up on Pointe and sharing their experiences, sharing their beautiful photos, their experiences, and their advice for you. Pick up your copy of Brooch magazine, grab it during the pre-order to get your t-shirt and your keychain as well, and keep your Pointe dreams close to heart. They're worth going after. If you have that dream in your heart, it is worth going after. It is worth putting in the work, and we're here to support you every step of the way. So I hope you had a lot of fun with this. Again, if you want to hear about how to go on Pointe, go listen to my other episodes on the criteria for getting ready for Pointe, for going on Pointe, and I hope you'll go for it. I hope you'll go for it. If you have questions, reach out to me. I'm glad you've been enjoying these Q&A podcasts. I'm looking forward to a couple more of them coming up soon. All right, I think that is it for today. So until next time, I wish you very happy dancing.